5 men, 30 days, a promise of freedom. In the late 1940s, Soviet researchers proposed a terrifyingly simple theory. If you remove the need for sleep, you create the perfect soldier, unstoppable, alert, fearless. To prove it, they sealed 5 political prisoners in a gas chamber. They pumped in an experimental stimulant known only as the Nikolaev gas. They thought they were creating super soldiers. Instead, they unlocked the gates of hell. The environment was sterile, cold concrete, 5 inches of steel, one-way glass. The subjects were given books, cots without bedding, and enough dried food to last a month. And of course the gas, odorless, invisible, continuous. For the first 3 days, the experiment appeared to be a success. The subjects were calm. They talked, they bonded. The microphones picked up conversations about their pasts, their families, the trauma of the war that had just ended. They were optimistic. After all, if they stayed awake for 30 days, they would be released. But on day 4, the tone shifted. The conversations stopped. The camaraderie died. They stopped looking at each other. They stopped talking to each other. Instead, they began to whisper. They positioned themselves near the microphones, murmuring dark, disjointed things about the other 4 test subjects, informing on them, lying about them, trying to win the favor of the invisible captors behind the glass. They believed if they sold out the others, they might be saved. They didn't realize the gas had already begun to rewrite their minds. Day 9, the breaking point. It didn't start with violence. It started with a sound. One of the subjects began to run, back and forth across the chamber, and as he ran, he screamed. He screamed for 3 hours straight. He screamed until his voice cracked. Then he screamed until no sound came out at all. The researchers hypothesized he had physically torn his vocal cords. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was the reaction of the others. They didn't react. They didn't cover their ears. They didn't try to help him. They continued to whisper into the microphones, ignoring the man running himself into madness just feet away. Then, the whispering stopped. 2 of the captives began taking the pages out of the books. They smeared them with their own waste and pasted them over the glass portholes. They blocked the view. The screaming stopped. The whispering stopped. Day 12, inside the chamber, total silence. But the oxygen sensors told a different story. The consumption levels were high, too high. These men weren't sleeping, they weren't resting. They were consuming enough oxygen to indicate they were undergoing extreme physical exertion, like they were hunting or fighting, but not a single sound escaped the thick steel walls. Day 15, fearing the subjects were dead, the researchers broke protocol. They turned on the intercom. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." They expected silence or begging. Instead, a single voice drifted back through the speakers, calm, rasping. "We no longer want to be freed." At midnight, the chamber was opened. The stimulant gas was flushed out and replaced with fresh air. And that is when the screaming returned. But they weren't screaming in fear. They were screaming in agony. They recoiled from the fresh air as if it were acid. They begged, pleaded, and clawed at the walls, demanding the gas be turned back on. The soldiers entered. 4 subjects were still alive, but they were no longer men. The food rations from day 5 hadn't been touched. What stood before the soldiers were skeletal nightmares. Their skin was pulled tight, veins visible, eyes wide and unblinking. They had torn at their own bodies. When the soldiers attempted to restrain them, the subjects exhibited strength that was physically impossible. It wasn't adrenaline, it was something else. They fought with a manic ferocity. They didn't feel pain. One subject suffered injuries that should have been instantly fatal, yet he continued to fight for minutes, screaming more, until his heart finally stopped. They were terrified of one thing only, falling asleep. To them, sleep was death. In the end, only one survivor remained. The military commander demanded the researcher enter the room with the creature. The researcher, terrified, drew his sidearm. He pointed it at the subject's head. The creature smiled, a wide, unnatural smile. The researcher asked, "What are you? I must know." The subject leaned forward against the restraints. "Have you forgotten so easily?" it rasped. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher fired. The bullet found its mark. As the subject died, he choked out one final sentence. "So, nearly free." The Russian sleep experiment remains a legend, but it asks a question we might be afraid to answer. Is sleep a biological necessity, or is it the bars of a cage, keeping the monster inside of us from getting out?